Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. My name is Adam Jupp. I'm Head of Business at the MEN, and I'm joined by Jen Williams, who's our Social Affairs Editor, and we're here to talk about devolution and specifically the idea of there being a Greater Manchester Mayor. You'll have seen it all over the news today, but Jen, this is actually something you've been working on for a while, and we first broke details of this on Friday with a bit more on Saturday as well, didn't we?
Yeah, it's something that probably has been, the ball probably started rolling at the start of this year, really, because our leaders, particularly Howard Bernstein, Chief Executive at Manchester City Council, and Richard Leese as well, have been in negotiations for some time about how to get more power for Greater Manchester and for the combined authority of 10 leaders. So it became increasingly apparent as the year went on that George Osbourne was quite favourable towards that. And there were then a number of reports by the new chair of HS2 and various think tanks, particularly as the Scottish referendum came closer, that said that Greater Manchester was probably ready for quite a substantial wave of devolution. And that really started to kick in probably at the end of the summer when George Osbourne said, I'm going to give you something in the autumn statement. You won't be disappointed, but made it quite clear that if we were going to do it, then we would need to have some kind of elected figurehead.
And tell us a bit about, I mean, people are fascinated about how these deals are done, I think, and from speaking to your contacts, I mean, what is the process behind this? Is this our sort of leaders locked in a room with Osbourne and his representatives, and, you tell us a bit about what you understand the process to be and how that works and how late into the night these things go sometimes?
There's an enormous amount of politics involved in this, and it's quite, I mean, if you're a politics geek, it's fascinating because there's the politics between the Greater Manchester leaders themselves, who clearly are largely Labour but not entirely Labour, and there's lots of friction there between both the parties and also what different bits of Greater Manchester want. And then there's the politics between the region as a whole and the Treasury, and the closer we've got to the autumn statement and the closer we've got to where we are today, the more people like Howard Bernstein have been up and down to London having negotiations with Treasury officials and trying to essentially wring as much as they possibly can out of George Osbourne in exchange for what it increasingly became apparent his bottom line was he wanted us to have an elected leader.
You've been with Osbourne today. Firstly, tell us what he's had to say to you, but also a bit about what behind the scenes kind of key figures in Greater Manchester are thinking and saying about this deal and how significant it is.
I think pretty much universally all the leaders and George Osbourne are of the view that this is a pretty historic deal. It's been hard won. It's taken an awful lot of deft negotiation on both sides. I mean, they were all singing from the same hymn sheet today, saying it was a revolution in local governance, and that it was going to create jobs for Greater Manchester, that it will improve our transport links, that it will bring all kinds of benefits over a period of the next sort of perhaps 3 to 5 years and on into the future. I think behind the scenes, as everything's on, quite as straightforward. I think there are probably some within the combined authority who feel they would have perhaps liked to have got a bit more, that they would like to see a bit more detail in what has been negotiated, because this is quite broad brushstrokes stuff at the moment, and exactly how those powers will work, because clearly, just as the public probably wonders how much power the elected mayor will wield, I suppose our existing politicians will probably still have jitters about exactly how that's going to work.
We've got some questions now that have been emailed in. Firstly, people are wondering how much is this whole thing going to cost us as taxpayers in the region?
That's a good question. We just don't know at the moment. We just don't know. The existing finances around the combined authority are perhaps not all that clear as it stands. There is money goes into the pot from each of our 10 councils, but it's not all that transparent. So perhaps the actual financing of that Greater Manchester-wide governance will become clearer as a result of this. But as of today, I have no idea how much it's going to cost at all.
Okay, turning to the issue of mayors, a lot of people are saying, well, we've already said we don't want one of these. So why are we getting again? I think there's an important distinction here between Manchester, Greater Manchester, And I know people locally are keen to stress this isn't going to be Boris of the North. This is going to be sort of our version of it. But taking that question first, why do people perhaps feel they're getting this thrust upon them if they've perhaps previously said they don't want it?
Well, yeah, I mean, the first important distinction to make is that Manchester rejected an elected mayor. It's never before been pitched as a Greater Manchester mayor. The key difference between what was being offered Manchester was essentially you would have ended up with a council leader with another name, with perhaps a little bit more in terms of executive powers, but really very little difference. The reason that politicians believe that this is a good deal for Greater Manchester is that this person comes with power attached. So they will have power over budgets which are currently decided in Whitehall. They will be able to plan our transport infrastructure into the future in a way which we simply can't at the moment. And they will just be able to take decisions which currently, quite frankly, a lot of areas dream of being able to take at a local level. Now, that's not to say that there aren't arguments for and against it, and I think a lot of people will see this as having an elected figurehead imposed on the region when they didn't ask for it. And certainly Labour and the Liberal Democrats have both said that this deal should not have been conditional on having a directly elected mayor. But the argument that both the Combined Authority and George Osborne would make is that it comes hand in hand with a lot of power that we have never seen the like of before.
And of course, people might not want it, but actually Greater Manchester has shown that it's more than capable of getting the authorities to work together for the greater good in the past, hasn't it? I mean, even just the ownership model of the airport, I guess, being the perfect example of that, and numerous things that have already been done that actually show that that the region's more than capable of working together and singing from the same hymn sheet when it comes to the greater good.
Yeah, it's been something which we've long been viewed nationally as being very good at. The cross-party working across Greater Manchester is something that, I mean, even among, if you take somewhere like Merseyside, which set up a combined authority earlier this year, they've struggled even among Labour figures to decide what they're going to do, whereas across Greater Manchester this probably goes back 20 or 30 years. There is a lot of pragmatism and there's a lot of cross-party working, and by doing that, there's no doubt that has been essentially what has got us to where we are now. And also, it has to be said, the fact that a Conservative Chancellor is willing to work with a largely Labour region. There's been quite a lot of political pragmatism on all sides, because clearly all sides see it as a way of getting what they want at the end of it, which is, I mean, obviously from Greater Manchester's point of view, more money, more jobs, more wealth, more growth, this region, and from George Osborne's point of view, probably a great many different reasons, not least probably electoral, but that cross-party working has clearly resulted in what we've seen today.
So in terms of what people on the street understand, perhaps explain it to us. This is different, isn't it, to mayors who you might see wearing kind of massive chains and opening events, but also what will happen to existing elected mayors. So what will happen in Salford, for example, if and when this comes into play.
So I think in this country you've got there is some confusion, because we have what we've always known to be a mayor, which is a ceremonial mayor, which is essentially simply a kind of civic figurehead who doesn't have any power, and they turn up and they only open things and they wear chains. The elected mayor model, which has really come in from America, is a bit unfortunate that it has the same name, because it's a completely different thing. So this elected mayor would be entirely separate to that, and your ceremonial Salford mayor or your ceremonial mayor in Tameside or Bury or wherever would still go about doing what they currently do. The only elected mayor we currently have in Greater Manchester is Salford, because that's where it was put to a referendum and they voted yes. As far as I can understand it, and I think George Osborne said this today, there would be that the situation would not change. Salford could still have an elected mayor who would run things at a local level within Salford, and the Greater Manchester mayor would be running different things across Greater Manchester. perspective. And if you look at Boris in London, there are a number of local boroughs in London who have elected mayors, such as Tower Hamlets. I think Newham has got one. And that has just continued, and Boris has been a sort of level up, overseeing other things.
So elsewhere we've had kind of stuffed monkeys and former police officers and all sorts of people who've ended up being elected as mayors. Here in Greater Manchester, who are the types of people, or specifically some of the names who we could see going for this position? Is it going to be politicians? Is it going to be council officers? Is it businessmen, celebrities? Who might we see?
Many people would expect this to be a Labour race. I'm not sure it's necessarily that straightforward, but certainly the Labour contenders would be the kind of the first ones that you would look to politically. Richard Leese in Manchester, I think most people would probably put at the top of the list in terms of likely contenders. He has been at the forefront of much of what has happened in Greater Manchester for the last 20 years or so, and he's been a key figure in this deal that we've got today. Having said that, this would be put to a vote of Labour Party members across Greater Manchester when they were coming up with their candidate, and there were tensions between the outlying areas and the city itself. There's also a possibility that there might be younger Labour candidates who view somebody like Sir Richard Leese, or somebody like, for example, Tony Lloyd, who's the current police commissioner, and is another possibility, as being the old guard, and that perhaps it's time to have some new blood. So you have people like Jim McMahon, who's the leader, is in his early 30s at Oldham, and has shown himself to be really quite ambitious. There are perhaps a few MPs. There's Johnny Reynolds in Stalybridge and Hyde, Labour MP, again quite young, got a lot of ideas. So I think within Labour, there are a number of possibilities, both within council leaders and also MPs. Outside of Labour, there are any number of people that you could speculate about. You could say Alex Ferguson, say Maxine Peake, perhaps. You could say, I don't know, someone like Danny Boyle is somebody that I've speculated at in the past. I mean, take your pick. It depends who runs, really, doesn't it? And clearly, the other parties will all be looking to stand somebody, somebody prominent as well and well known in the region. But it's very, very, very early days.
Not even mentioned Bez there.
I haven't mentioned Bez, although Ladbrokes have put odds on him. Well, I think 60 to 1. I think perhaps they've got Bez down at, but yeah, stick Bez in as well, definitely.
I think we're focusing so much on what almost is viewed perhaps as Greater Manchester is conceded or is put in on its side of the bargain. I think you and I both know from conversations with contacts that actually it's what the region's getting in return that is the significant thing. Some of the things that are included in that are are really significant things that they've been fighting for a long time. So do you want to perhaps run us through what those things are, what we are getting in return, and why they're so important?
Yeah, I mean, I think for most people, the first and foremost thing that they would notice, and probably the thing that would make one of the biggest differences to their lives, is transport. So we've had it confirmed that we will get a tram extension to Trafford Park, and this has been something that's been on the table for some years, something that we've been arguing for some years. This deal has signed that off. There will also be pretty much complete control over buses in the region, which has been a huge problem for all sorts of reasons, not least in terms of the economy, because people simply cannot get from some parts of Greater Manchester to where the jobs are, and the routes have been axed, or the routes have been too expensive, and the buses are not joined up in any way with the rest of the public transport network in the region. So transport, I would say, would be the number one thing that I think people might start to see a difference through this. Some of the other stuff is longer term. Some of it is about the fact that for the size of our economy, we are lagging behind in terms of the wealth generation and the jobs and the money that we really should have. They're hoping that control over their skills budget means that they can then actually start to create the jobs in the right places, attract investors in, attract big companies in, and match them up with the correct skills, and get people, also essentially get people back to work through a work programme which is we've already begun in Greater Manchester, but which essentially George Osbourne said you can take control of your back to work programme, which up until now has been run not particularly effectively by the Department for Work and Pensions nationally. So I think those two things, transport and jobs, are probably the two key things. And the other thing on transport is something that George Osbourne was very keen to flag up today, which is the idea of this Oyster card kind of thing, which will mean that you can get on bus, tram, train, everything, and it all links up, which he said would work better in Greater Manchester than it does in London at the moment. So you can only cross your fingers that will be the case.
And just finally, you've been around kind of all the key players in this today. It's been described as a momentous occasion, but you'd expect George Osbourne to say that. Just on the ground, how excited are the key players in this region who you speak to almost every day? How excited are they about what's happened today, and how significant is it in your eyes?
Some of them are very excited about it. I mean, they really do genuinely see it as a masterstroke and a really groundbreaking deal. I think it is a groundbreaking deal. I think if you look at what other areas have, and the fact, as I said before, the fact that a largely Labour region has managed to get this all out of a Conservative Chancellor, although it must be said that you can't underestimate Trafford's role in that, because Trafford often, as a Conservative area, acts as a bit of a broker in these things, does make it definitely a landmark deal. I think there are some who do have some reservations about it. Some would have liked to have seen greater control over welfare, for example. There's a number of them that I think feel that perhaps we could have ended up with control over our welfare bill, and that was really the key. That was the key thing that we needed. But I don't think anybody is pouring cold water on it. I think they do see this as being a turning point, I suppose. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Jen. Hope you've all found that useful and informative at home. Of course, we'll be giving you plenty more updates on the website during the course of the day, and in tomorrow's MEN as well. So do keep an eye on that, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.